So before we get started, I thought it would be a good idea to give a very brief overview of how animation works. So in Blender's interface, we'll click on the bottom slot we've got here and change this to a timeline. So a timeline basically shows the number of frames we've got that the animation is going to take to reach the end. So we've got 240 frames there, and it's playing back, if we go to the output panel, at a speed of 24 frames per second. So that means that's going to take 10 seconds for the playhead to get from the start of the animation to the end of the animation. So if we change the end frame to 24, you can see the little grey area has become much smaller, and if we press home with the mouse hovered over the timeline, it will fill the space so we can see it more easily. If we press shift left arrow or shift right arrow, it will go to the beginning or the end of the animation for us. Now if we play this back, you can see it's much faster now because it's only taking 1 second to get from the beginning to the end of the timeline. And if we want to, we can change the playback speed of these 24 frames by changing the number of frames per second. So for example, if I change this to 240 frames per second, then now you can see this is going much faster. But generally, for film and TV, you want it between 23.98 and 30 frames per second. The higher you go, the smoother the playback will appear, but it will take much longer to render, obviously, because you've got more frames. But also, people are used to this sort of frame range for film anyway, so you might as well take advantage of that, whilst also minimising how long it takes to render your animation. So let's just re-extend this to 240 frames, so we're going to get 10 seconds playback. We'll change this back to 24. Press home over here, that'll make it so we can see the entire range of the timeline. Now, how do we record something changing in the viewport? Well, it's a little bit like a flipbook. So with a flipbook, you've got a different picture on each page, and as you flip the pages, you're going to get the effect of an animation. Now, with 3D rendering, it's the same thing. You can store values of an object in individual frames, and then as the animation plays back, it will read those values and update the state of the object to create the animation. For example, if we've got this monkey and we want to make him shrink, so let's just go to frame number 1, so press shift left arrow, and then we need to make sure we record the initial state of any properties that we want to animate. So we'll hover over the scale over here, or the viewport, and we can press I, which will bring up a menu that allows us to specify the type of keyframe we want to create. In Blender 4, they're considering using the K key instead of the I key to bring that menu up, but currently, what happens now is, if you press I, we just get a keyframe created for whatever we've got set as the default keyframe. In this case, the location XYZ, as is indicated by it turning yellow in the top right hand corner there. Now, although we can change the default in the Blender preferences, so under the preferences we've got an animation section, and we can say what do we want the default keyframe to be if we've not actually specified what we want it to be using a key insert. So a key insert is just, you can say, right, any new keyframe, I want it to create the keyframe for either location, rotation, scale, or any combination of these. So just to keep things simple, we'll reassign that menu back to the I key, unless they've changed it to the K key and you'd prefer to stick with that, it's up to you. I'll just undo that. We're going to go into the Edit menu, under Preferences, and we're going to go to Key Map, and we're going to search for Insert Keyframe. So under Insert Keyframe, I want to change what this does. And we don't want it to be in the clip editor, we want it to be in the object mode, so in the 3D viewport in other words. And we can see this if we come out of here and we'll go down to, let's just close that. We'll go to the 3D view, because I only want it to affect when I press I over the 3D viewport. And then we're going to go down to object mode, global, and then we'll look for I. So we've got I here, insert keyframe. I just want to change this so that instead of insert keyframe, it's going to be keyframe insert menu. So click on this, and now if we just go over here, press I, we're going to get that same menu so that we can choose ourselves each time what sort of keyframe we want to insert, and if we don't want to keep doing this, we can then come to the key inset and just choose what we want it to be in there. And again, we can get rid of that just by pressing the X. And then we can choose to make a keyframe for scale. So click on that, and it's going to add a keyframe for all three of these properties for the scale. Now we can see we've got these little yellow dots. So if I just minimize this, on frame 1, this shows us that whatever object we've got selected, if we don't select anything, it will disappear. But if we select the object, it will say there's a keyframe for this particular object in one of its properties. So we don't know which property it is. So let's open this up. It tells us the keyframe is for the object called Suzanne. The keyframe is also inside of the Suzanne action. So an action basically is just a container for an animation. It makes it so that you can make multiple variations of the animation and then choose which one you want, or even use that same animation on a different object completely. So we'll open this one up, and now it tells us that the keyframes or keyframe is on the object transforms. And if we open this up again, then we finally get to see which ones they are. So it's the X scale, the Y scale, and the Z scale. So we've put a keyframe on each one, and over here that's indicated by these going green when we're on a different frame. But if we go back to the frame it's on, then they'll turn yellow to indicate there's a keyframe on this particular frame. So we've done that on frame 1. So let's just minimize these again. Let's go to frame 60. Now what we're going to do now is scale this down. So I'm going to select my monkey, press S to scale, and I'll just scale it down. And you can see they've changed to orange over here, which indicates that these are different from what we've got recorded, and we've not yet made a keyframe so that they get saved. Once we make a keyframe, they'll turn yellow when we're on that frame, or green when we're not on that frame. So we can either hover over the viewport and press I and choose scale. This will add a keyframe for all three of these parameters. We can hover over here and press I, and that will automatically make a keyframe for all three of these. So press I, you can see it's gone yellow. I'll just undo that, Control Z. We've got an alternative way we can do it. We can press I over the timeline, and then we can choose to only selected channels. Now at the moment, we don't have any channels selected, but if we go over here, and we can choose X, Y, or Z, or all three, if we hold down Shift, we can select more than one. But if I just choose Z and press I, and I'll say only selected channel, you can see it's only added the keyframe to the Z channel. Now if we play this back, you'll see although we've only put the keyframe on frame 60, not on every single frame, it's still changing smoothly. And that's because it's doing something called interpolation. As we play this back, Blender is interpolating between the value that we had set on frame 1 to the value that we had on frame 60. And the next thing we'll look at is how we can control that interpolation so that we can have more control over the speed that it changes between the two keyframes. And I'll just select these, and I'll press X, and I'll say delete the keyframes, and I'll scale it down again. Let's go back to frame 60, or whatever, 60, yeah, frame 60, scale it down. And this time, I'll just hover over here, press I, and I'll say all channels, and now it will scale on all three X, Y, and Z. So at the moment, if we play this back, let's just change this to 60 frames. If we play this back, you'll see that although the timeline is moving at a set linear speed, so it's the same speed on each frame, the actual speed at which the property is changing, so the speed that the monkey is scaling down, is slow initially, then it's a constant sort of linear speed, and then at the end, it slowly stops at its final resting place. Now, we might not want that. We might want it to be a constant speed, sort of a linear speed between the two. And this is where we can look at the interpolation and how to control it. So to do that, we'll go across to the animation section over here. We'll change this little window to a graph editor. If we zoom in on this, press home. So we can see we've still got our keyframes on frame 1 and frame 60. And in actual fact, if we just open this up a little bit more, you can see we've got keyframes for X, Y, and Z because we recorded a keyframe for each one of these parameters over here. But we can't see them because they're all the same value. But if I just show you, I move this around, you can see we've got the X, and then the Y, and then the Z up here. So I'll just undo that, just so you know that there are actually 3 lines there. So let's put those back. Right. The main thing to understand about the graph editor is that this F-curve, this interpolation line, basically shows us the value between the keyframes. So if we look to the left over here, we've got the value on frame 29 as just over, well, between 6, almost 0.7. And we can confirm that by looking over here. So 0.677. Now, if you wanted to make this closer to 1 at this point, you've got 2 options. You can either press I and add another keyframe to all these channels, and it will add the keyframe wherever the timeline is. And if we move that up, then we can bring that up there like so. So that's one option. But the problem is, this makes things, you can see there's a definite transition that's noticeable, and that can make your animations a little bit jerky. So I would avoid that wherever possible, so I'll delete those. We're back to where we were. And instead, on these keyframes, we've got something called handles. And these handles will allow us to modify the line between the keyframes, and in effect, changing the value. The flatter the line is, the slower the value is changing, and the steeper the value is, the faster it's changing, as you might expect. So I'll select all 3 of these keyframes over here, and then we can move these along either by scaling, like so. So if I scale that on the x-axis, you can see it's flattening the line. We can also move these. Let's just grab this one. We can move that on the x-axis, but the problem is, because I've selected it on its own, it's not affecting the other keyframes, the other F-curves belonging to the X, Y, and Z as well. So just to make it a bit easier, we're going to View, and we'll change this, we'll turn off only selected keyframe handles, so that we can now see all the handles all the time, and that will allow us to select all 3 at once. And now when I move these across, you can see that's going to do all 3 at once. We can move them around like so, or we can select the keyframes, and we can scale these. We can rotate them using the R key and then rotate, and we can move them, all the keyframes at once as well. Now, let's move all these across. So GX, bring those across as far as we can. And if we play this back, because this is flat, it's very slow initially, but then it's got to somehow get to the end value in a much shorter amount of time because it's spent so long being flat. So it will become much steeper, change much faster, and then it will slow down again towards the end. And if we wanted to, we can select these keyframes and move these across as well. And now nearly all of the change in value is going to happen around about frame 30. It's going to be quite slow initially, really fast, and then slow at the end as well, because we've got that steep bit only in the middle. So if we play this back, very slow, incredibly fast, and then very slow again at the end. And this is useful for things if you imagine maybe a car pulling off. So as your car pulls off, it never starts moving at 60 miles an hour. It will slowly transition from 0 to 60 miles an hour over a set amount of time, depending on what sort of car you've got. So if you had a crap car, you know, this would be quick, this would be longer, because your 0 to 60 time is going to be much slower than, say, a sports car, which would be something more like this, because it's getting to that speed much faster. Now, we aren't limited to just having Bezier handles. So if we wanted to, let's just move these away from each other now, just so it's easier to see the difference. So bring that one down, GY. So we can see all 3 of these lines now. We've got the X, the Y, and the Z. So the red, the green, and the blue, which matches over here. And by the way, you can hide these if you just want to see one of the lines with little eyeballs, or you can lock them so you can't modify them, or you can just turn them off altogether so it doesn't contribute at all to the result. Okay, so the handle types, we can change these to perform different, well, to act differently. So let's just make this a bit more obvious. I'll go to frame 30, and I'll add another keyframe to all channels. Let's bring this up. I think I will actually view, we'll say only selected keyframe handles, just to make it a bit easier now. We'll just separate these a little bit more. Right. So we've got these 3 keyframes now in the middle, and they've all got a Bezier handle. And if we want to, we can change this to be something else. So if I right click this, and I'll say the interpolation mode, instead of a Bezier handle, I want that to be linear. So let's click on linear, and you can see what's happened now is we've actually got a straight line from the current keyframe to the next one. And that will just give us a permanent, well, it will give us a constant speed from this keyframe to the next one with no ease in or ease out. So no slowly building up speed and then slowing down gradually at the end. It's just a straight line, constant speed all the way. So that's linear. You can also choose constant, which means it will stay on whatever value it's currently on until it gets to the next keyframe, and then it will change straight away to the next keyframe's value. We've also got these automatic ones. So we've got things like bounce. And you'll see what happens with that one. It will generate a shape for us, which will emulate something bouncing. So if we play this back now, the Z scale, because it's the blue line, if we watch this, it sort of bounces towards the end. We can change it to elastic. If we just zoom out, you can see the effect that has, and play this one back. You can see just the Z scale is giving us that sort of action. And if you want to slow this one down, we can change the ease in method. So the ease in and ease out, if we go to easing over here, we can either ease in, so it slowly eases in, like that, or we can ease out, which is the default, I believe, like that. So basically what's happening there is it's fast initially, or the value changes a lot initially rather, and then it eases out because the line becomes flatter, which means the effect is less. So it's becoming, the value is changing to a smaller degree over sort of a longer period of time. So let's change that to ease in and ease out. And now we've got this effect. So it slowly eases into the whatever it's going to be doing, and then it eases back out again. So let's just play that. And there's the idea. Right, so right click and we'll change this back to Bezier. Okay, so within Bezier, we've also got a few other options. If we right click, we can change the handle type. So the handle type, we've got a few different options. We've got free, which means we can manipulate these independently. So the left and right handle, you see we can change those on their own and they won't affect each other. If we just select this, right click, and we'll choose handle type aligned, that will automatically keep them aligned. So if I move this one, the other one is going to stay aligned with it on the same angle. Next up, we've got vector. So if we choose this keyframe again, right click, and set this to vector, that means that both sides of the handle now are going to be pointing towards the handle of either the previous or the next keyframe. And when we move the next keyframe or the previous keyframe or the handle of either of those keyframes, this will automatically move to continue looking at it. So let me just turn back on all handles. So if we move this one here, for example, you'll notice this is continuing to move to look at it. So automatically it will continue to have that behavior. All right. Same on this side. We move this one. You see that vector here is continuing to look at that. Let's select this one again, right click, and this time we'll go for automatic. So automatically, it basically means it will try and find the smoothest transition between the previous and the next keyframe, taking into consideration the handle of those as well. So again, if I move either of those handles or the keyframe, previous or next, it will automatically modify these as well until we move it, and then they'll become aligned. And then finally, we've got auto clamp. So auto clamp means if we say we've got this one here and we just rotate that around, scale it out a bit, we've got a value here and it's overshooting and then coming back down. So if we turn on auto clamped, it means it won't overshoot. So it will stay within the bounds of that initial value until it will eventually go down into the next one. So all it means is basically it won't go above, or it won't go above the previous value or below the next one. So if I move this one down like this, and we'll rotate it like so, or down here like this and scale it a bit. If we do right click now and auto clamped, it won't allow it to overshoot itself because obviously itself is the lowest value. So it's staying flat basically to this value. If you want more information on this, by the way, you can always go to the Blender manual and you've got all it's more explanations there, because you'll probably, I wouldn't expect you to remember all this, but basically I'm just giving you a rough idea so that when it does come to use them, at least you've got an idea of the behavior. And that's how we can control the values of parameters between the keyframes that control those parameters. All right, so a few other things that we can do in this editor. It's very similar to the 3D viewport. So let's just have a look at some of those things to make your life a little bit easier. Right. In the 3D viewport, obviously, something we've already looked at, we can move things by pressing G. And by the way, you can just check here for the buttons I'm pressing. So G will move stuff, R will rotate stuff, S will scale stuff. But something else to bear in mind as well. Let's just hide those handles. We'll just tidy this up a little bit. Right, we've got something over here called the pivot point. So if you've done any modeling before, which you will have by now in this video, we've got the pivot point the same as in the 3D viewport, and that controls the central point that is used to scale towards or move from or rotate around. So if we change this to bounding box, and now what that means is there's going to be a bounding box drawn around the selected keyframe. So we had this one, and this one selected. So if you can imagine a bounding box, it would be probably something like this. And it will use the central part of that bounding box as the pivot for any transformations we make, such as rotate, scale, or move. So that's that option. So if we scale these in now, eventually they'll line up to where the center of that bounding box would have been. We can scale them again, and they're going to scale in from that same point. If we want to limit that to not affect the values, but only affect the frames that these are on, we can do S and then X, just the same as the 3D viewport, and that will limit the scale operation to only change the frame and not the value. There we go. We've got alternative method. We can change this to 2D cursor. So let's say, for example, we've got this animation. Let's just move these over here. And we want the animation to be shorter. Now, if I select all keyframes and then scale, they're all going to be scaling. Let's just change this back to bounding box. By default, they're all going to be scaling like this. But when we use the 2D cursor, we can actually change its location by shift right clicking. And then this point here, where these two blue lines intersect, is going to be the pivot point. So if I now, let's say I put this here, I've got these selected. If I rotate now, it's going to rotate. If I change this to 2D cursor, it's going to rotate around this point. So let's rotate. You can see it's now rotating around that point. And it's a little bit jiggly because we've got the snapping turned on over here. If we change this to no auto snap and then we rotate again, you'll see it's completely smooth. In Blender 4, that's changed a little bit. We've just got a new icon where we can turn it on and off here, and then we can select which type of snapping we want here. So it's the same functionality, it's just spruced up a little bit. And again, if we scale, it's going to be scaling towards that point in the where those two lines intersect. So this is useful because let's say, for example, I want to change the length of the animation. I normally want to do it from a set place. So I want the first frame to remain where it is, and then I select all the others and just scale them in. Now, obviously, I don't want to do it like that because I'm going to be changing the values. I only want to change the location of the keyframe so that they move further backwards, so they cover a shorter frame range. So I'll scale it on the x-axis, S, and then press X. Then we can scale it, and it won't affect the values. Or we can just affect the values if we want by pressing S then Y, like so. And that can also be useful as well. And lastly, we've got individual centers. So let's say we've got a frame here, a keyframe there rather, and we've got a keyframe here. We'll set both of these to be automatic. If I scale these now, and I'll leave it on 2D cursor, we've seen what's going to happen. It's just going to come down there. Now, if I change this to individual centers, then they're not going to move. They're just going to scale the handles. So that's incredibly useful. And again, if we rotate, we can rotate and they'll stay, the keyframes won't move, the values won't change, and we're just affecting the actual shape of the line between the keyframes. That's really useful as well. And I think that's it for the viewport. The rest of the stuff it's pretty self-explanatory. You know, you've got your filters, what you want to see and things like that. And you can always have a look through the menu to see what options you've got. Play around with it. There's nothing you can break. If anything that goes wrong, just press Ctrl-Z and you'll be back to how you were before. And lastly, before we move on to animating, let's have a quick look at actions as well. We spoke about them briefly. Actions are basically animation containers. So let's say we've got this Suzanne action over here. If I go to the dope sheet and then change the type to action editor, will show us this particular action that is on Suzanne. So let's add another object. We'll add a cube. Scale it down, move it across. Now we've got this object. It's got no animation on it whatsoever. But if we want to, we can click on this little drop down here and we can apply it the same action. So now we've got the Suzanne action applied to both models. So let's play this back. You'll see both have been animated identically. And the same as everything else in Blender, we can now make this one unique, and we'll call it box action. And we'll make some modifications to this. For example, we might want to move the Z scale keyframe across here, and now that's going to be animated differently. And if I wanted to, I could go back over here and then click and give this one box action, and now they're both going to be identical. So that's what an action is. It's just a container for your animation so that you can use that animation on different objects, or you can try different animations on one object. If you do try different animations, just make sure, so you don't lose other animations, that you tick this little box here, fake user. It means that when Blender saves and closes, it won't lose those animations. So always tick that, and that means they're always going to be saved with the file. Whereas if nothing in the scene is using them, and this isn't ticked, then it will be deleted, basically. Another use for actions is the ability to combine them together to make more complicated animations. For example, if you've got a person walking along and waving at the same time, then you could use one action to animate the legs and a different action to animate the hand waving. I'll show you an example of that now. So with Suzanne selected, I'm going to create a new action, and I'm going to call this action moving. And this is going to be just to move Suzanne from the left of the screen to the right. So I'll press I, and we'll add location and rotation. We'll go to the end frame, frame 60. We'll move Suzanne across, And I'll also rotate her to still be looking at the camera. We'll press I, location, rotation. So we've got keyframes for X, Y, and Z of both location and rotation. Alright, so let's add a fake user, and then we'll create a new one by getting rid of this one. And then we'll just go to frame 1. I'll select I, location only this time, and that's automatically created as a new action. And then we'll go to frame 15, we'll move Suzanne up so that she's still within the bounds of the frame. We don't want to disappear off screen. We'll press I again, and then we'll add another one for location. We'll take both of these, so to make sure they're both selected, they're yellow. Shift D, we'll move those across, then Shift D again, move them across again. Get rid of that end one, we don't need that. So if we play this one back, it's now bouncing up and down. Let's call this bouncing. So we've got two actions. We've got bouncing, we've got moving. Moving, and then bouncing. So how do we combine these two actions together? Because by default, we can only ever have one action that's in use by an object. And it's actually really easy. We go across to the nonlinear animation editor, which is in the underneath the animation header. You can see we've got this sort of a strip here that shows us whichever action is currently being used by this object that's selected. What I want to do is have multiple actions on there, and the way to do that is to push them down into a strip. So with bouncing one selected, I'm going to push that on down. It creates this little strip for us, and that allows us to select a second action now, or give the object a new another action to use as its live action. And we're going to use moving. And providing we've got the blending mode set to combine, we play this one back, we're now getting a combination of the bouncing track that we've pushed down and the active track above it. So there's a bit of a problem there. We only want the moving one to control the left and right, and the bouncing one to control the up and down bounce. At the moment, the left and right information from the bouncing strip is also being combined, which means that Suzanne is starting over here instead of over here. So we need to find a way to only have this strip influence the Z location and not the X and Y. So let's see how we can do this. If we go across to the dope sheet, we've only got the moving one in there, so we can't edit the bouncing one. So let's go back to the nonlinear animation. What I want to do instead is click on the bouncing one and press Shift Tab. This is going to make this one appear in any of the animation editors. So let's go over here. If you look in the timeline, we're going to have the bouncing one. Again, if we go to the graph editor, you can see we've got the bouncing one in there as well. It tells us here the bouncing action is the one that's currently active, or the one that's currently being edited rather. And again, if we go to the dope sheet and expand this down, we can see all of the channels that were recorded in here. And the problem was we've got the X, the Y, and the Z keyframes. We only really wanted Z keyframes, so we can either delete the X and the Y keyframes like this, delete those keyframes, and then this will work, or undo that. Another option is to just untick these options here so that the entire channel doesn't contribute at all to the animation. Now we'll go back to the NLA editor. We'll click anywhere or press Shift Tab, and now we've got both visible again. And this time, because we've only got the bouncing strip contributing to the Z location, it's not making the monkey start and end in the wrong place. It's not contributing at all to the X and Y location. And there we are. And if we want to make further edits to these, we can do that. Obviously, moving is the currently assigned live action. So if we go across to the graph editor, then we've got that one in there anyway by default. But if we were to put both down, so if I click on push down now, we've got no live action, which basically means if I go into any of the editors, there's going to be nothing for us to edit. And in that case, we have to select one of the strips and press Shift Tab and then go into the editor that we want to change. We can get quite complicated with this. We can change the blending mode, so maybe we want to multiply it or add it, etc. We've got various options in here, but I'm not going to cover all of these options just yet. We'll get to those later in the course. So all that covered, I think we're ready now to move on to animating the robot.